Thank you, Ms. Representative Wentworth. Over a decade ago, it wasn't clear that my husband and I were going to be able to live our dreams. Dave had recently moved to Grand Rapids to start our life together, and over that winter, his car got totaled in an accident. So to save some money, we went down to one car, and he began commuting to work on his bicycle. Making a left turn one morning, Dave was hit by a driver. He was locked into his pedals. The car hit the rear tire of his bike, launching him into the air, bicycle attached, spinning from the impact underneath him. His lower left leg was destroyed with multiple spiral fractures through his tibia and fibia. His malleus, which is the heel bone, was shattered into pieces, and his foot was broken in several places. We weren't sure he was going to walk again. In these moments, you wonder why these things are happening to you. And tonight, I know why. No-fault insurance meant that he was able to access care immediately. He had one surgery initially to save his leg, and thank God, the doctors were successful. Many months of unemployment and physical therapy followed. Several years later, he required a second surgery, which also caused him to lose wages and ultimately his job, in order to accommodate another multiple-month period of recovery, this time with 2 toddlers in tow. Even with no fault, this process hurt our personal finances. It set us back and triggered unemployment for my husband. Without no fault, we would have been unable to financially recover for years, if ever. The PIP plans on the table tonight are a joke. $250,000 was spent and gone by the time we started the first surgery. These plans are only affordable for people with good jobs. Everyone else, should they have an accident, is simply doomed to poverty. And don't be fooled that we aren't going to pay for it. We will. We'll just pay for it on the other side of the problem in escalating and out-of-control healthcare costs. Not long after this, Dave's sister had a catastrophic car accident, no fault of her own. This was in California. A truck, she lives in the mountains in the Sierra Nevadas. A truck had tried to make a U-turn on an icy mountain road. When she drove around the curve, she hit the ice, couldn't stop, and slid full speed into the side of the truck. My 7-year-old nephew directed traffic to prevent more accidents and save lives, while his little sister and his mom were unconscious in the vehicle. Soon, first responders arrived. My sister-in-law was airlifted off the side of the mountain in the Sierras and taken to Reno to receive care for fractures in her feet, legs, hips, and ribs. She was insured, but you can imagine the bills from nearly a week in ICU and 2 weeks of additional hospitalization, then months of intensive physical therapy to rebuild her body. She was able to recover and walk again, thank God. But her multi-year recovery wasn't compensated while she battled multiple systems because in California, a state without no fault, she and her children had to fight for compensation in the courts, retelling their story over and over again, opening up that trauma multiple times, and being forced to prove her medical history and personal damages to win compensation from the trucking company whose employee had nearly killed her and her 2 children. Thank God the trucking company was solvent enough to cover her damages. Because if not, if that had just been an independent contractor, she would have been on her own, and her future would have been nearly impossible to navigate. During this time, she was unable to work. Recovery and the courts were her full-time job. She was and remains the breadwinner for her family, and no victim of an auto accident should have to fight in court to have their medical costs covered. They should be able to focus on healing. Dave and I were lucky. While his sister balanced the stress of insurance companies, hospitals, and courts, we were able to focus on his recovery. It was hard. We had to be very frugal, but we made it with help from our folks and with the resources that were available to us. Because of Auto No Fault, Dave is a hardworking business owner today. He was able to commit to his dream to become a brewer, which is a very physical role where he's on his feet for hours at a time, constantly moving grain bags and kegs. He employs 30 people at his brewery in Grand Rapids. We couldn't have done this had we been in another state. We may never have been compensated. We may never have been able to save and invest in our future. We would still be paying off those bills instead of building Beer City. I would not be here. I would not have been able to take the financial risks to follow my dreams. And without this, I'm not sure we would still be married. The stress of getting through this, even with all those resources, was a lot for a young marriage. But at least in this scenario, we had dreams that we could work for, something to inspire us and keep us moving forward. Without Auto No Fault, our dreams would have been stolen by debt. I say all of this fully aware of our privileges, because my husband and I are white, because we're educated, and we could navigate complex systems, because our parents had enough wealth to help us pay some of the bills during this time, because we don't pay exorbitant insurance rates on a monthly basis just because of where we live. We could pinch, we could save, and we could make it. Another great privilege was access to medical care, some of the best. So let's talk for a moment about my city's economy. Mary Free Bed, a state-of-the-art rehab facility, is able to employ hundreds of people in my city with good jobs where they work to restore lives like Dave's. Spectrum Health, the largest single employer of people in my district, also positioned to help people recover. Their business models will be significantly disrupted by these changes in Michigan law. This decision will have ripple effects throughout my community. I heard tonight that post-secondary trauma supporters in my community are anticipating a $16 million loss as a result of this bill. Those are jobs that are held by people who work hard, people who care even harder than they work. And because I know what it's like to be the spouse of an unemployed person, because I know what it means to do things like go down to one car, ask your parents for help if you're lucky, tell the kids that we can't afford Disneyland, I don't want that for the people in my district. I want the people in my district to thrive because they are supported by a state that has their back when life doesn't go as planned. My job as a person who has been relieved from the cycle of debt from the system is to make sure that the security provided by Michigan's no-fault system is passed forward to others. We can fix this system and achieve lower rates for the people of Michigan without sending MCCA into a tailspin because too many people are forced to opt out in order to afford to drive to work. The MCCA isn't going to be the magic bullet that drives auto insurance rates down. This only represents a small portion of the cost of our auto insurance bills. Less than $200 per year is well worth the security it provides for the next person who is injured by an accident, whether they're from my family or yours. The real savings can be found in other reforms that focus on transparency and accountability for the stakeholders in the system. These bills take a pass on those key issues. My family's story is one among thousands and far from the most harrowing stories that have filled our inboxes. Tonight, we need to be guided by what is possible. We need to be guided by equity for the people throughout Michigan and by the stories of the lives saved by auto no fault. I hope our story helps you understand why this system works, the dreams it keeps alive, and the long view in all of these cases. Behind every limb saved by an auto no fault are multiple families with dreams that are bigger than themselves. This bill is about people who get hurt. It's also about the people who are trained to deliver the gifts of recovery. Let's make sure that those dreams survive moments of tragedy, because they can. I am voting no on this bill, and I'm holding out for my district's top healthcare and post-secondary trauma care employers, their employees, and for all of the families that need a stable MCCA and fair and affordable auto insurance in this state. Thank you for your consideration and for hearing our story.